everybody, and welcome to Common Censored. I'm Lee Camp, joined by Eleanor Goldfield.
Hello. Did it take you a second to remember your name there?
Well, you know, I've had a lot going on, so.
Or was it one of those
name has not been at the top of the list.
Was it one of those like existential moments that you get when you're like high, looking in a mirror? Who am I really?
Yes, I've had several podcast episodes that just begin with, "Hello, everyone. I'm." Whoa. And then I sit there for the next 45 minutes.
And that's where my editing skills come in, folks.
So, this is the show, I think. This is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other stuff like existential threats to your mental health.
And we are going to get into some important stories this week. Of course, the massive hurricane that just hit. But I thought we'd start off. I've covered it immensely on my show and stuff like that. So I don't think we need to go through all the details of what a catastrophe Afghanistan has been, as we have our farewell tour. I also don't think it can kind of go without saying that although this is called the end of the war in Afghanistan, and Biden just gave a speech about how this is the end of the war in Afghanistan, we're going to keep bombing the fuck out of the country. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't really sound like the end of war to me. So we don't need to go through all that because I think we've done it. But one thing I just wanted to address very quickly is this whole let's celebrate Biden for finally ending the war in Afghanistan. He's our hero. And the main point I want to make is I don't celebrate war criminals or murderers or sociopaths, no matter if they do something nice at some point. I don't, like, if a murderer kills a whole family and then he's leaving, I'm not like, thank you so much for leaving. That's so awesome of you. You're a god among men.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the kind of shit that you see oftentimes with the Democrats. Like something happens that, you know, like Obama says that we're not going to build a Keystone pipeline, and everyone's like, Obama's the best president ever. I'm like, wow, you need better standards. I hate to see how your relationships look if this is all it takes. Because I mean, the honest reality of it is that, Afghanistan has been such a quagmire that really the sensible solution for the empire was to leave. It's not because Biden was like, oh my God, you know, this is really fucked up. And, you know, it's not like, you know, Lee, as you pointed out in your recent episode of Redacted, that he realized, wow, everyone was right. The anti-war left was so right. Like, they had it all along. Like, that's not what happened. It's just that it made sense. Same thing with, like, the Keystone XL pipeline when Obama said, we're not going to do this. And then, of course, everyone congratulated Biden for basically taking a step sideways and just agreeing with Obama and reinstituting that decision after Trump reversed it. These are decisions that were made not because they give a flying fuck about the future or your children or your water. It's because it made sense to the capitalist imperialist framework.
Right, but the credit that can be given is to activists that have continued to keep these type of things in the news and continue to cause legal battles and legal troubles for these corporations so that the capitalist equation gets tilted towards the side of the correct path for humanity. But so there's credit to be given, but the credit should not be given to the fucking war criminals. I mean, Biden. It's not like Biden showed up yesterday and ended the war in Afghanistan, which, as we've said, he's not fully doing. But he was vice president for fucking 8 years, and it's not like he was giving speech after speech about how, you know, we need to end the war in Afghanistan, but Obama won't do it.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm sick of the whole. Let's celebrate Biden. It's like, fuck you, man. I'm not, like, you know, like, if when Dylan Roof surrendered to police, were we like, what a wonderful human being? I mean, the cops might have been, but were most people like, oh, this is great. Look what he did. He gave up eventually. Oh, cool. What a good guy. No.
Yeah.
Fuck you all. Like, so I just wanted to get that out there. And I'm actually going to do more on what a catastrophe Afghanistan was on the upcoming Redacted Tonight, even though I did it on the last Redacted Tonight, but it's just too much for a few minutes. I got to keep doing it. So.
Got to get it off your brain nipple.
I believe that, yes. Last week I was focused on brain nipples. This week, who knows? Maybe it'll be my ear taints.
That just sounds so much worse than a brain nipple. That makes me want to shower.
Well, wait.
And if you don't know what we're talking about by the term brain nipple, folks, then you need to go watch Redacted.
Yes, watch the last Redacted Tonight. So let's get into Hurricane Ida, which has been catastrophic, and we're going to go through that, but also it's gotten a lot of mainstream coverage, but weirdly not enough coverage amongst independent media so far.
And I think part of this, is because there's a lot of coverage that's happening on corporate media that's covering the basic points. What independent media, which you can check out the articles that I'm pulling from at radindmedia.com, the importance of independent media in these moments is to draw connections between a storm like Ida and capitalism and, the continuation of climate chaos and racism and, all of these aspects, tying them together to understand the intersections of our realities. So again, these articles that I'm pulling from today are up at radindmedia.com, so check that out. So Hurricane Ida, you're probably already aware of some of this, but it's the second most powerful storm to hit Louisiana in recorded history. And as if we lived in a simulation, but we don't, folks. Let it go. It made landfall exactly 16 years to the day after Hurricane Katrina, which was the storm that devastated Louisiana in 2005, broke the levees.
Also, quick note, it's the first time in recorded history that two storms back-to-back, one this year, one last year, have hit the country, both with sustained winds over 150 miles an hour.
I'm getting there.
Oh, sorry.
But yes, you're
I'm
correct.
Allowed to say something sometimes too. Jesus.
My notes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just won't speak for the rest of the show. Ida was so powerful that the hurricane actually reversed the flow of the Mississippi River. This is fucking ridiculous. The idea of the amount of water coming down the Mississippi River.
Right. Like, I don't know if folks listening to this have ever fucking seen the Mississippi River, but we're not talking about like some quaint little river, like a creek type thing in a fort. No, this is a massive fucking river. To reverse the flow, I don't even understand the amount of power and energy required to do that. That's fucking insane. But it happened. So here's a feather in the cap of climate chaos.
It'd be nice if it reversed the flow of idiocy coming from our leaders in this country.
I know, dude. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and it's like, I really wish that trees were like they were in fairy tales, where they could just like bitch slap people for being idiots. It would be a totally different world we live in right now.
Like the M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Happening?
Yeah. I mean, that's super... I was thinking more of a cartoonish bitch slap. That's, The Happening is way darker. But
not a mass genocide? Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. But, sure, I guess. Yeah, if you want to get all morbid about it, Lee, geez. So another thing to discuss here is, like Hurricane Katrina broke the levees. Why? Because the levees were basically made out of fucking paper. compared to what they needed to be in order to withstand that kind of hurricane.
I also have more on that after we go through this stuff.
Oh, well, you can jump in.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we want to take a detour into part of the reason that Katrina destroyed New Orleans is Greg Palast did some reporting on this, but he's one of the only ones. There's been very little about it. But basically, the Army Corps of Engineers and they're doing this with industry in mind. I mean, I don't know that Exxon helped fund any of it or anything like that, but it probably was oil companies coming to them and saying, we really want this to happen, and then the Army Corps agreeing to do it. But anyway, they built a channel through the mangrove forests that went like directly into up to New Orleans and from the Gulf of Mexico. And Greg Palast details how he talked to this guy, something Verdeen, who is a hurricane specialist at one of the universities there, and he had been calling the alarm far before Katrina ever hit, that they basically created an alley straight for hurricanes to follow straight into New Orleans. And with the mangroves provided a natural buffer. And so the mangrove forests were also gutted by big oil companies, just kind of Swiss cheesing it so that they could explore for oil. But on top of that, there was this massive channel, and Katrina did not hit New Orleans dead on. It missed it by 35 miles. But because of that channel, it sent surges of water straight towards the levees, which, like you say, were not well built. And so that's what caused the flooding of New Orleans, was this fucking hurricane, welcome mat that the Army Corps had built with industry in mind, if not backdoor deals directly with big oil, et cetera. So yeah, they are fully responsible for the deaths after Katrina. It's not just that a hurricane hit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you bring up a great point about the industry. An entire football field of land is lost in southern Louisiana every day. And that doesn't make any sense to your brain, because that sounds absolutely insane. Like, how is there anything left of Louisiana? There's actually, NASA has some, if you go, it's now like a year old. These maps are from August of 2020. But they've got maps that show the recession of the southern Louisiana coastline. And it's fucking, like, it's creepy to watch it go.
So it's lost to water, and you mean, and a lot of that is a combination of climate change and the gutting of the mangrove swamps and things like that.
Right, exactly. And these kind of the Swiss cheese that you mentioned. I mean, when I was in southern Louisiana, in the Chafalaya Basin, there are shit tons of like little. Well, I mean, they're not roads because they're in a swamp, but whatever. Whatever the water term.
Channels.
Thank you.
Like channels, canals.
Whew. There. The best part is that I'm stone cold sober. I bet you if I was drunk, I would remember. I would have remembered that word.
There you go.
So there are all these channels, and when I first went through them, I was like, "Wow, this is really crazy how many channels there are here." Because you just kind of assume that a lot of this is natural, because you don't want to be.
It looks, well, the way mangrove look, there's water kind of everywhere growing within the trees, so it looks quasi-natural.
Right.
And you think, oh, they just grew this way.
And then one of the folks that was very familiar with this area showed me an aerial map. And once you look at it on an aerial map, you're like, oh, I see. There are these it looks like a fucking grid, like in a city. Right. There are these perfect cutouts so that people can access the oil rigs and things like that. And you can literally drive by them on your boat, and there's, they're just out there. Like these little oil rigs, like in the middle of this swamp. And you could do anything to them at that point. Like you could, I mean, there's nobody protecting them. I mean, not that obviously like you don't want to fuck with the oil rig, but it's like, this is how secure they are. They're like, they're like our nuclear codes being on floppy disk.
Nuclear arsenal. Yeah.
Right. And of course, this kind of Swiss cheesing in a place like the Atchafalaya Basin is incredibly detrimental to the ecosystems there, and completely destroys that ecosystem's ability to protect itself and therefore protect what's further inland.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, this is this is climate change, but it's so severely amplified in this particular area because it's not just about climate change, like, oh, there's bad weather now. It's like, no, climate change has literally gutted the resources that this area naturally had to deal with these kind of storms. And so another intersection of this issue is, of course, infrastructure. And, the levees broke, as I noted, because they weren't built to withstand. I mean, people had been talking about the need to replace the levees for years before Katrina hit. And obviously, as we all know at this point, no one gave a fuck. And so again, here, 1 million people, it's probably more at this point, are without power in Louisiana. All 8 of the transmission lines that provide electricity to New Orleans alone have failed in the high winds, and one tower actually collapsed into the Mississippi River. This is like day after tomorrow shit, people.
So just to be clear, we switched now to right now. We were talking about Katrina for a while.
Right, sorry.
But this is now.
Yeah. This is Hurricane Ida. I was just assuming that everyone was following along in my head, so... If that's not the case, let me know.
Well, listen, it's tough to follow your, sober train of thought if you'd had a few.
Dude, I am getting crazy over here with the chamomile tea, let me tell you. And of course, in lieu of the electricity, folks are having to rely on fuel generators. And in some cases, those are failing too. At one hospital, the fuel generators actually failed. And so people in the ICU were having to try to manually resuscitate people. It was basically the 1800s again. Let me just put it that way. And basically
yeah.
Go ahead.
But by the way, sorry if people hear the beeping. I don't know what the fuck's going on in the alley outside here. But I was gonna. I mean, maybe we're gonna get into it. Maybe I shouldn't jump ahead. But I was gonna say they saw what happened with Katrina. They had years to build up the services that would deal with this kind of shit.
Yeah, no, but the response from New Orleans was basically like, yeah, well, just fucking deal with it. And the mayor of New Orleans actually said that, there wasn't enough time to prepare for this disaster. It's like, oh, really? 16 years wasn't long enough? That's a bummer.
Yeah, that sounds like a little bit of time to prepare, I would say.
Right. And in typical fashion, I mean, it's really kind of like a replay of 2005 in a lot of ways. The New Orleans Police Department Superintendent Sean Ferguson announced Sunday night that anti-looting patrols would be deployed throughout the city, which, if folks will recall from 2005, there were a combination of police and white supremacists, oftentimes this one and the same person, who went out on these, let's just call them crusades, supposedly against looting, but really they were an excuse to shoot black and brown folks point blank in the streets. And
yeah, and let's be clear here. Most of the quote unquote looting that goes on after a natural disaster is usually people trying to survive. It's people desperately getting food or water from a store that has been closed because the whole area is flooded. And so, yeah, it's not great, but also the situation's not great. And to give your resources to gunning down someone in the street because they're stealing water from a store is like fucking insane. And what went on after Katrina was fucking nuts. It was like you said, it was far right wing and fucking neo-Nazi dipshits, which includes a lot of the cops, used as an excuse to just like travel down the roads and either attack or kill like random black people that they saw walking around. It's just the whole looting thing is a fucking it's a propaganda bullshit. I mean,
absolutely. I mean, capitalism forces people to make decisions like that to survive. I think any one of us, if it was like, okay, you're going to watch your child die in your arms from thirst, or you're going to steal a bottle of water, if you don't choose option B, then you're a fucking psychopath. Right. And, you know, this is what capitalism forces people into. And then instead of saying, hey, really the big problem is that people don't have water, they say the big problem is that people are stealing.
And you know, you and I both love the book by Scott Crow, was it Black Flags and Windmills? Mm-hmm. Where he details, you know, operating in post-Katrina New Orleans, or Nolans, as you're supposed to say. And the quote unquote services that you would expect in a time of need and a disaster, like the police and the paramedics and the you know, various other, you know, the sheriff's department, all that shit, a lot of it was being devoted to just like, can we go up and down the streets and arrest someone for walking around? Mm-hmm. Very little of it was being devoted to saving people and to making sure that people were going to be okay. And so it's this incredibly fucked up scenario where you had a racist system with the police to begin with, and then when the shit hits the fan and there's no electricity and there's very few phones still operating and people, you know, push comes to shove, they just become more racist and more horrible, and they're not there to really help people. Right,
exactly. And folks on the ground have said that, you know, the way that New Orleans seems, the government of New Orleans seems to be handling it is, quote, every man for himself. And this is exactly what happened during Katrina. There was no fucking support from the government and from these, you know, these government entities that literally exist in order to support and protect people. And again, you had 16 fucking years to look at what happened during Katrina, right. See, hey, maybe this wasn't the best way to deal with it, and rectify that, and you just chose blatantly not to. And this is, of course, you know, really just indicative of the intersections of capitalism and white supremacy and playing out on the stage of climate chaos.
Yeah, and you know, we're going to see this more and more, but this is what happened. I mean, you basically just said this, but this is what happens to a society when it is kind of in the waning days of an empire, when you're in late stage capitalism. The social safety net, the infrastructure that exists to make sure that people are not suffering in that society becomes gutted and tenuous, whatever's left of it. And you know, because of climate change, we're seeing more and more disasters of greater and greater power and consequence, and that is overlapping with late stage capitalism. A time when people probably didn't get great medical attention in the best of times in New Orleans if they weren't wealthy, right. And then you add climate catastrophe on it. And guess what? That not so good medical attention becomes non-existent. So,
yeah. Well, and of course, with regards to medical attention, Louisiana was buckling under the surge of COVID that's been happening, and so hospitals are already basically overflowing, and then you have people coming in for injuries related to the hurricane. And then, power goes out. Sorry about that. So, I mean, this is literally like in the richest country in the world, an industrialized nation can't fucking ensure that a hospital has enough beds, even just to deal with folks suffering under the weight of a pandemic, much less climate chaos and the injuries that are sustained via that. And
so the moral of the story is, if you're there right now and you have a chance to steal a beer from a store, fucking do it, man. This is shit is fucked up. Get a beer.
Yes, and also find some mutual aid folks. There's been a lot of movement via mutual aid groups. In particular, mutual aid disaster relief is kind of a great hub to look at in terms of information about the supply lines and the supply runs that are being set up. Supply chains all the way from the north on the eastern seaboard, like places like Pennsylvania. People are gathering supplies and figuring out ways to get them down to Louisiana. So if you are able to support in any way, whether that be actually volunteering on the ground, you must be vaccinated in order to do so. You must have both doses in order to do so. Or donating via money, or donating via supplies, what have you. You can check out Mutual Aid Disaster Relief. They're on Twitter at Mutual Aid Relief and at Mutual Aid Disaster Relief on Instagram. And they've got information up about the various supply chains that they're connected to and plugged into to help support people on the ground. Please do not give any money to the fucking Red Cross. Just don't, okay? They will take your money, wipe their ass with it, and then hand it directly to their CEO, who makes six figures, to act like they give a shit. So do not give your money to the Red Cross or any other organization that is in that same that same space.
What was the story? I can't remember whether it was FEMA or Red Cross. They were both kind of catastrophes, according to Scott Crow in his book after Katrina. But I think it might have been Red Cross, where where they advertised for days, like they were handing out pamphlets all over the neighborhood. This is a neighborhood with no electricity, weeks after the storm, still flooded areas, still bodies floating in houses. And they went around, clearly put effort and time into having people walk around the neighborhood, handing out pamphlets saying, we're coming, we're going to be here on this date at this time, show up at this, parking lot or warehouse or wherever it was. We're going to be there, get ready, it's happening. And so all these people have received these pamphlets. And so the day comes and they're lined up. There's hundreds of people lined up at this, parking lot, warehouse area to receive the help of the Red Cross. And these trucks pull in, like 3 tractor trailers, and they open up all their doors, and they have paper towels and plastic utensils. And they just start handing that out to everyone.
I don't even know if they had paper towels. I think it might have just been utensils.
And that was it. And people are sitting there with like bloody wounds and shit, and or even just things as simple as like, my dog is dying and needs medication or whatever,
and I'm hungry.
Or I'm hungry, and they're like, listen, you take these plastic utensils and you find some damn good food with them.
You
all right?
live your best life.
You live your best life with these utensils, because the whole eating with your fingers, that's just gnarly. You guys, that's disgusting. And so we thought we'd help you out here. By the way, the plastic utensils actually has a little oyster fork in there, so
so you're welcome.
Should be good to go.
Yeah,
just amazing.
And of course, this is just one example of how vehemently and grotesquely out of touch these big organizations are. They're not plugged into these neighborhoods. They're not assessing the actual needs of people who are affected by these catastrophes. The people who are the people who are actually connected to folks in those communities, and listening to them vocalize what they need, and then working within these mutual aid networks to ensure that they get the actual things that they need, which, going out on a limb here, is not a truck full of fucking plastic utensils.
Well, maybe you can build a levee out of those if you put them all together.
You know what? It couldn't be any worse than the levee they already have. So there's a 1 point for reusing. But I also just before we move on, I also want to point out that there's some chatter, some chitter chatter happening about the comment that I made earlier, which is that this it's the second most powerful storm to hit Louisiana in recorded history. The last one happened in the 1850s. And this can prompt, and has prompted, particularly in the South, people to say things like, well, look, it happened in the 1850s, so that was before climate change, so that's not a thing. Okay, so first of all, shut up. And secondly, this is blatantly fucking ignoring the fact that it's the first time in history, as Lee pointed out, that hurricanes with sustained winds of 150 miles an hour hit a state back-to-back seasons.
Yeah.
In the last time was Hurricane Laura last year. So this is the first time in it reversed the flow of the Mississippi, for fuck's sake.
Basically, this, and we're seeing this in many things, forest fires, tornadoes. We're seeing this in many different ways, or droughts. A 1 in 1,000 year occurrence are happening now once every 10 years.
Right.
So it's not that they don't ever happen. Sometimes conditions are just crazy perfect, and once every 1,000 years, you have this crazy drought where, a butterfly farted in the Pacific, and then it hit a dolphin on the blowhole, and then just one thing, runs into the next, and it grows and grows and grows, and you end up in the one in 1,000 year drought or storm or whatever. But we're now in the place where these 1 in 1,000 year storms are happening once every 10 years or less, right. Sometimes once every 2 years. So they're like you can watch meteorologists say that, this is the actual rating, like once in 1,000 year or once in 100 year storm is an actual rating they use. And so they'll be like, yes, this is a once in 100 year storm, and we had one like it last year.
And then I have to quote Inigo Montoya and say, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. And if you're below the age of 30 and you have no idea what I'm talking about, please go watch Princess Bride.
I think Princess Bride is so legendary that even the little kiddies are watching it.
I mean, I would hope so. I would really hope so. But because if you're not, you're missing out. And that's not old lady Goldfield talking. That's just fact. But yeah, I mean, in line with that, looking west, this year hundreds have died in the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia because of record-breaking heat. A friend of mine lives in Vancouver. It was 115 there. Vancouver is in fucking Canada. It's above Washington State. It should not get 115 there. And of course, right now we're seeing
these are places that are normally like that type of area is normally 50 or 60 in the at the worst a lot of summers, or it used to be, and then they got up to 80 and now they're hitting 115.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, and even if you just look at like the long term, a friend of mine when I lived in LA, he grew up there, and he's probably like 20 years older than me, so he's now in his 50s. But he said there were seasons when he was growing up, and he was like, I tell people this and they don't believe me because now if you live in LA, there's no fucking seasons. It's just 75 and sunny until it's not. And then it's like 100. And then you have some random day in February where maybe it's like low 60s, but there aren't seasons. And yet
and you've also mentioned that your grandmother used to talk about how it didn't used to be this windy.
Right. And we used to laugh as kids. She's Swedish, or she was Swedish, and she, lived up on a cliff where now it's fucking windy like every other day. And we used to laugh at her and say like, haha, that's ridiculous. But literally, if you look at climate change, it has caused more wind. And if you've been on a plane like consistently in the past, 20 years, you'll notice that there's been more turbulence when you fly.
Those are called love snuggles from planet Earth.
I thought you were going to say like gremlins or aliens or something.
No, planes, the airlines always want to tell you everything's fine. So. But yeah, of course, it's going to cause more wind and stronger wind because when you have more heat in certain areas on the globe, then that's a greater temperature change. And what causes air to move at all is temperature differentials. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, this affects, it's what we see happening in California right now with the wildfires. It's set to be the largest wildfire season on record, with more than 1.7 million acres burned just in California alone. At the moment, the wildfire Caldor has engulfed hundreds of homes in its wake, and it's moved across eastern California in the past 2 weeks. It's now threatening Lake Tahoe, where residents on the California side have been ordered to evacuate. The Dixie Fire, which is just 65 miles north, has been burning for now 2 months. So, congrats on that anniversary. It's not even 50% contained at this point, and 770,000 acres have burned. It's the second largest fire in California history, and 6 of the 7 largest fires have occurred over the past year or so. So
it's funny you say it's the second largest of California history. And last summer, I was making fun of an NBC News report about the horrible fires in California. And one of the things they said on that report, I mean, they were talking about how bad they are, so that wasn't what they got wrong. But one of the things they said in that report was, this is one for the history books. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's going to be worse next year and the year after. There is no one that's going to be looking at a history book in 2035 going, do you remember 2019 or 2020? That was the bad fire year. No, it's going to keep getting fucking worse. And it's like,
right.
how bad does it have to get for the country and really the fucking rulers who have the biggest, they've got the biggest entities and tools at their disposal to deal with such a thing. Like, how bad does it have to get before they realize that, like, we've got to change the way we live and we should all be like, our day-to-day should be shifted, much like it was for World War II. We dropped everything. We said, hey, everybody who's, back then, every man in the country, you're going to war. Every woman in the country, or a lot of them, you're going to factories to fill the spots of the men. And we completely shifted our economy over the span of like 2 years to deal with World War II. It needs to be like that. It needs to be like that level of shift.
Yeah, and, we still have Nazis to kill, so I mean, not that much has changed. So really, I think, making that shift is something we're comfortable with.
No, something has changed. There are women in factories.
That's true. And just kind of to wrap this up, I think it's also important to, one of the things we talk about on this show quite frequently are intersections and how we shouldn't talk about issues as, silo issues. All of this has to do with COVID, because climate change helps spread infectious diseases. And scientists have talked about this for years, the same scientists who people are ignoring when it comes to climate change and COVID. There's evidence that air pollution, including that of burning fossil fuels, has worsened COVID outcomes for frontline communities living in areas that really bear the brunt of increased air pollution, which, when you think about it, is not fucking surprising because COVID affects your respiratory system, and if you can't fucking breathe to begin with, it's going to make it worse for you.
Right.
So, again, important to connect all these things. Also, with regards to the forest fires, it's important to point out that another thing that's hampering California's ability to fight these is the fact that they've traditionally used slave labor from prisons in order to fight fires. And because of COVID, they don't have as many of those people to pull from. So their workforce for fighting these fires has diminished.
God, that's so rough. Well, clearly the answer is to lock up more people so they have enough firefighters.
Right.
The answer could never be pay firefighters enough that everyone wants to sign up. That couldn't be an option, right?
No.
No.
No, that's silly talk. So yeah, I think we've got time for one more before we before we call it. I kind of want to end on a high note, or well, actually,
I'm already high.
I said that and didn't realize that it was a pun. But it is, because high-rise window cleaners have entered their second week of a strike. All right, I'm sorry. Okay,
Not a good job to be high during.
No. Oh God, and that the way, dude, I can't.
That made you uncomfortable.
I can't even. So when I'm like in a parking garage and I'm like parked on like the third floor and I look down, these people are cleaning windows on fucking high-rise buildings, and I'm over here like, when I just looked 3 stories down. So
I'm always amazed that they're like the ones that are, some of them are on bigger scaffolding, but the ones around here I've seen recently are like sitting on a little plank of wood. Like it's it's like, my first potty kind of seat. And they've just got that tied to rope. And then I assume there's a safety wire so that if the plank were to if the potty breaks, then they wouldn't, fall to their death. But, that safety rope is hooked to what? Their belt buckle or some shit? Like, it's just one of their belt loops.
Well, and actually, this is one of the reasons that they've gone on strike, is because, again, speaking of intersections, some folks, and this is another article that you can find on radindiemedia.com. It's an In These Times piece about this ongoing strike. But one of the issues is that because non-union workers have kind of not flooded, but have entered into this workforce, the standards for workplace safety have fallen, as they oftentimes do, because one of the reasons you have a union.
Fallen?
Okay.
Sorry, I thought this was the pun segment.
It was going to be, but I feel like, fine, let's just make it.
The gains of workers have been wiped away.
Oh God.
The window wipers.
I got it. Thank you.
Okay.
If you're gonna make the puns, you can't get annoyed that I groan every time you do. That's the agreement. But yeah, the fact that there are non-union contracts have meant that workplace safety has diminished, and plus the aging infrastructure of these tall buildings that haven't been maintained. The workers are saying, look, people are going to die. There have already been accidents, and people have died doing this job, of course. But, some of the people that were interviewed for this article were saying, I've been in this accident, and this accident wouldn't have happened had it been for, better workplace safety that you get through the union. So one of the things that they're demanding is that these contracts be exclusively union, and that the union have control over training so that people are properly trained, so that you're never sending somebody up there to clean a fucking window 70 stories up who doesn't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah, the U.S. infrastructure is definitely decreasing, and then there's something like the Florida condo where the whole building just comes down on you. Yeah. So that's not good.
It's good times. But so this strike is happening.
So they're striking, and I take it it's going well, although obviously mainstream media won't cover it.
No, of course not. So this is happening in Minneapolis. So it's a very localized strike, but I think it's worth noting because I think it's also very powerful to talk about workers going on strike, particularly in places that are, that require this kind of specialized work. The power of people to just walk off the job and say, hey, look, now you're fucked. Now you don't have access to this labor. And this is something that's been kind of ongoing for quite some time. Negotiations for the contract started back in 2019, but workers really quite nicely agreed to pause negotiations due to COVID and continued to work throughout the pandemic. And the union reports that half of their workers in Minneapolis then contracted COVID. And now they're basically saying, look, well, this can't fucking continue. And, you don't get to just keep kicking the can on this. Vis-a-vis, they want a higher wage and they want better safety and things like that. So again, I think, despite the fact that this is very localized, I think it's a really important story. Also because, when we share these stories, they inspire other folks to take into consideration what's happening in other places.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine they may have a tough go of it because window cleaning is one of those things where, the windows will get dirtier and dirtier and they just have to stand there and be like, how dirty are you willing to put up with? So it's tougher than if you're an electrician and they can just go on strike, turn out the power, and they go, well, we'll turn it on when you pay us more.
Truly, but I mean, have you ever seen a Wall Street boardroom that doesn't have clean windows? I mean, this
That's
is
very true.
This is important for the people at the top, literally and figuratively.
It's very true. The rich like their sparkly clean windows, so they can look out on the world and go, I have shat on all of this.
Exactly. It's important.
Yeah, that's very true. So you guys might have noticed that we've been on. I was on a 2-week vacation, and then we're easing back into it. So we're not all at full schedule yet, but we hope you've enjoyed the episode. And there's still plenty of content. New Redacted tonight just came out. Another one's coming out this coming week, along with an interview with Steven Donziger, still under house arrest in New York City. So yeah, check out all that, but all of that's at radindiemedia.com. We put all of our stuff up there. It also has things like Gray Zone, Empire Files, Mint Press, so many great outlets, Common Dreams. So that's all at radindiemedia.com. So just check it every day and you'll get pretty much everything you need to know. And let's see, what else? Oh, if you want to support this show, we don't have any funding. We don't have any ads. We don't have any sponsors. It's all you guys. So go to liberapay.com/LeeCamp, liberapay.com/LeeCamp, and become a member. If you just feel like you got like $1 out of this show, that'd be awesome. And what am I missing? Oh, no, it's over, right? Was your movie half off?
It still is half off. It's half off until September 6th in commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Blair Mountain. So if you just go to hardroadofhope.com, you can type in the discount code MINEWARS. That's all one word, MINEWARS, and you'll get 50% off.
Not Mind Wars, which I feel like is something else we're embattled in, but MINEWARS. Type in that promo code at hardroadofhope.com, and you will be able to watch Eleanor Goldfield's multi-award-winning film. For very cheap, for very few little dollars and cents.
Yes, indeed. All of my stuff is at artkillingapathy.com. All of Lee's stuff is leecamp.com. Please check out radindiemedia.com. It's a great place to just get your daily digest of rad independent media. And
and last thing, if you're in Los Angeles, we think the show is still happening, September 18th. Graham Elwood and I performing live my other podcast, Government Secrets. That's September 18th, and tickets are at leecamp.com. Just hit the schedule tab at leecamp.com, and you can grab your tickets.
Sweet. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for hanging out with us, and until next time, act out.
Keep fighting.